Hi, I'm Kayla Sweet. I am a life coach that specializes in burnout prevention and recovery. I work with women to create lives that are truly thriving and filled with joy and balance. A lot of the women I work with are highly successful people who are great at setting goals and achieving them, but just are missing that piece of self love, self care, personal fulfillment, balance, boundaries, all of these other things that you need to go alongside your professional success. I am very passionate about burnout prevention, and that is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So, the reason that this is so near and dear to my heart is because I personally experienced a pretty severe place of burnout very early in my professional career. I was very young. I went into the field of community mental health as a case manager and skills coach at that time, and I had a lot of challenges ahead of me. And when I burned out, when I hit rock bottom and was just completely exhausted and depleted, it made me question everything. It made me question my entire life path, my education, my worth as a human being, my identity. Everything was in flux because that's what burnout does. It just crumbles everything. But the beauty of this is that when you've experienced burnout, or maybe you haven't gotten quite there, but you've experienced stress for long enough that you're worried you're going to burn out if something doesn't change. The crumbling that happens when you deal with stress is an opportunity to lay a new foundation, to lay a foundation of boundaries and self-love, a foundation that is internally strong and resilient. And that is what we're talking about today. We're talking about burnout prevention because success doesn't have to equal exhaustion, especially for women. We have different societal expectations than men do, and we try to carry all of these social burdens: how we look, how much we weigh, how we dress, how we act, constantly putting other people's needs and perceptions of us at a higher level than we put our own joy and satisfaction and needs. And it's not sustainable, and there is a better way. So that's what we're going to talk about. I have both my bachelor's degree in psychology and my master's degree in consciousness and transformative studies. So I spent a good amount of my adult life in academia, and I like to be very clear about what we're going to talk about before we dive in. So we are going to talk about what burnout is. I'm going to give you a definition. Like I said, many years in academia, I appreciate a good definition. I think it's important to be clear what we're talking about. So we're going to talk about what burnout is. We're going to talk about the stages that burnout progresses through, because it's important to know what this looks like and how it progresses, because then you can identify where you're at or where people you love or care for are at, and intervene early before it reaches the really debilitating stages that are later in the burnout cycle. Finally, we are going to talk about what you can do starting today to prevent burnout or to recover if you're already on your way to burnout, if you're already in chronic stress, because you deserve it. And I want you all to learn from my mistakes and to live a life that is thriving from the start. All right, so the definition, and we are talking about occupational burnout here. It's important to note that occupational burnout is different than other types of burnout people can experience. Some other common types of burnout are caregiver burnout or chronic illness management burnout. So this isn't referring to either of those components, but a lot of the symptoms are going to be similar. But basically, when you're experiencing occupational burnout, the way that the World Health Organization has defined this is that burnout is a syndrome conceptualized by chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed and shows up in three particular dimensions. The first is emotional exhaustion. Basically, total energetic depletion, just feeling like you have nothing left to give mentally, emotionally, physically. You're energetically drained. The second is depersonalization. This means that you've put distance between yourself and your job. You've become disengaged with your work, with your profession, and not in a healthy way. Usually, what accompanies this disengagement is cynicism and a highly negative attitude about your work, your world, your organization. It can expand beyond just your job, but it usually starts there. Some resentment and things like that come up. And then the third dimension is reduced professional efficacy. Quite simply, we do not do as well in our work when we're burned out. And this is not because people don't care or they're lazy or they're not trying. This reduced professional efficacy happens because stress has such a strong physiological impact on the body that the part of our brain that is responsible for things like emotion regulation and problem solving and executive functioning, all of these really important things, goes offline when you are under stress, and that gets worse the longer you are under stress for. So you just aren't able to perform at your highest level when you're burned out. And it's nobody's fault. It just is what it is. So those are the three things that allow you to know you are burned out, or a colleague is burned out, or family member, whoever it might be that's being impacted by this. Those are the characteristics. That's how we know. That's the definition. So it's chronic. It's taken place for a long period of time. It's work-related stress, and then it results in those three dimensions we talked about. Now, before we talk about the stages that burnout progresses through, I want to talk about preventing burnout. Just very briefly, things that you can do to prevent burnout. Because if you're not burned out, you have a beautiful opportunity to create a foundation for yourself that is strong, so that when the stress rolls in, you are still standing and it doesn't break you down. And when I say if you're not burned out, this is a great opportunity. That's a very small percentage of people in America, especially. I've read a lot of research on burnout, and the statistics are usually between 40 and 75% of people that experience occupational burnout in their lifetime. So it doesn't mean everyone's burned out all the time, but that's nearly half of us, and then approaching maybe 3/4 of us that experience burnout in this way. That is absolutely unacceptable, and it doesn't have to be this way. There are things that organizations can do to protect people from this, but there are also a lot of things that we have to do to advocate for ourselves, meet our own needs, and have the self-awareness to care for ourselves radically well. And that's what I want to talk about. So when you are trying to prevent burnout, you're trying to not become one of these statistics, there are three things that you can focus on. The first is managing your mindset. I know this might sound cheesy, but it is absolutely essential. So when I say manage your mindset, I don't mean go into toxic positivity. I don't mean ignore reality and just only focus on the positive. There are some key things that we can do to ensure that we're thinking in ways that are healthy and helpful and sustainable. The first is just practicing mindfulness and self-awareness of our thoughts, allowing there to be stillness in your day to quietly reflect on what you're thinking. This is huge. A lot of people don't allow this. We keep ourselves busy, we're on social media, we are binging Netflix, and we keep ourselves going, distracted. And what happens is that our mind runs on autopilot, usually with very negative and unhelpful thoughts. It's just kind of playing in the background. We don't even notice it. We're used to it. When you start to develop mindfulness of your thoughts, you start to create awareness around them, you can see the thoughts that you haven't picked. Maybe the thoughts that you don't even believe that are running in your mind and dictating how you live your life. Once you have that awareness, you can start to choose the thoughts, beliefs, and values that you want running in your mind at all times, that are going to actually get you towards the life you want. Okay, so mindfulness is one piece of managing your mindset. The other piece is a growth mindset, a growth focus, an orientation towards what could be. And this is simply about the belief that all of us are capable of anything, of becoming better than we are today. So when a challenge comes up, rather than letting it destroy us, we look at that as an opportunity to grow and learn and become more healed, more whole, and more self-aware people along the journey. It's not about perfection. It's about using life and all of the challenges that life likes to bring us as opportunities. Finally, when you are working on managing your mindset, creating an inner world that is healthy for you, is self-compassion. This is the hardest of all three. It's the one that most of us get stuck on because it's not easy. This is why I coach women, because a lot of times the thing that's keeping us from balance and joy and fulfillment in our lives is that we are really lacking in self-compassion. We have an inner critic that just will not give us a break, that will not rest. It's relentless. So intentionally developing a kind and compassionate inner voice towards ourselves, to turn towards ourselves internally with love and care, is a game changer. And it takes practice. And if you need support, again, I am a life coach. I work with women on this. I'd be happy to talk to you, to do a consult to see if you would be a good fit. Moving on. The second thing that you can do to prevent burnout is to simply manage your stress. And this is what we're going to be talking about a little bit more today, so I won't get into it a whole lot here. But there are 3 things that you can do to help you manage stress. I'm going to talk about those very briefly. The first is completing the stress cycle. So this is actually an idea that came from the book Burnout, and this was written by some very brilliant minds. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Emily and Amelia Nagoski wrote this book, and it is phenomenal. So they talk about the stress cycle and how we have to complete it. Burnout happens when you get stuck in the stress rather than moving through to the other side. So essentially there is stress, which is a physiological response in our body. It's cortisol, it's adrenaline, it's a racing heart, it's high blood pressure. It is your body preparing to run from danger. That's stress. That's what happens at a physical level. And then there are stressors, which are the things in our mind and in our life and in our world and our environment that trigger that stress response. So to complete that stress cycle, there are very specific things that you can do to make sure that you fully process that stress and moved to the other side. Because with all emotions, we don't just get to bypass them. We have to move through them. Stress is the same. It has a process that needs to be completed. And there are some specific ways you can do this. The most effective thing you can do to complete the stress cycle is physical activity. So this is what I recommend to everyone. And it doesn't matter what your mobility limitations might be, or your age, or if you've had injury, you can find some kind of physical activity that you can do to complete the stress cycle. And if you're completely averse to exercise, you can even do progressive muscle tension and relaxation. And over time, this will also have a similar effect. It's all about processing the stress at a physical level because it's a physical phenomenon, okay? So that is the first element of managing your stress, completing the stress cycle. That means a stressor comes, you have this physiological reaction, and then rather than just going into another stressful situation and then another and then another and just letting the stress build over time, you intentionally insert something helpful, whether that is physical activity or deep breathing or time with your family or friends or a hobby, something intentional that's good for you to break that cycle, and it allows your body to return to a physiological baseline. This is stress management 101. It's what you need to do. So this is key. Second thing you can do in general when it comes to managing stress is to just focus on your physical health. Sleep well, eat foods that nourish you, and move your body. If you can do those 3 things, And when I say eat well, I also mean drink well, stay hydrated. Those are very basic things that we neglect. They will give you a resilience to stress so that when it comes, at least physiologically, you have a strong foundation to move through it rather than be taken down by it. And then finally, when you are wanting to manage your stress, you want to make sure that you are carving out time in your life for leisure activities, for hobbies, for fun nights out with your family and friends, for reading, for gardening, whatever that looks like for you, whatever you enjoy, making sure that it's built into your life is so important. Okay, so that's managing stress, a very brief overview. The third thing that you can do to prevent burnout is manage your time and your energy. So time management is something you've probably heard of before. What you need to do when you're trying to manage your time is to plan and organize what you're going to be doing, what you need to accomplish, and to set realistic timeframes in which you're going to accomplish these things. Sounds pretty straightforward, but it's actually really hard for a lot of people. So there are strategies out there that you can look up. Time blocking is one that I use, but different things work for different people. There's no one set answer as to how to manage your time effectively. Try different things until you find what works for you. Pair this with managing your energy. And this is really key. A lot of people will try to manage their time. They have these very meticulous schedules and they don't work. This is because they aren't factoring in energy management. Energy management is about building in time into that schedule to rest, to recharge, and to re-energize. So doing things that lift you up, that energize you, and then also building around your natural energy cycles. So knowing that there are certain times of the day and certain times of the month that you're going to have more energy and other times you're going to have less. So you need to set realistic expectations and goals around that to manage for it. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to build into your schedule the things that you need done the most or that require the most mental energy at the times where your energy is peaking, where it's the highest. And those more monotonous things that maybe don't require as focused attention can go during those slumps. Or maybe you build in an exercise break during a time where you usually have an energetic crash. For me, that's in the afternoon. So building in time for rest, nourishment, re-energizing, and planning around your natural energy cycles are so helpful. Finally, when you're doing this, time management, energy management, be kind to yourself and be realistic. This only works if you remember that you're human in the process. When we try to be a perfectionist about it, we set unrealistic goals and then we're mad at ourselves for not reaching them. And that doesn't help anybody. It just adds to our stress and gets us closer to burnout, which is what we're trying to prevent. All right. So those are some key things you can do before burnout ever takes place. But now we are going to talk about the 5 stages of employee burnout. This again is for your awareness so you can understand what each stage looks like, and if you recognize these signs and symptoms coming up in yourself, you can prevent them, you can work through them, and you can create a life of thriving for yourself. So the first stage is the honeymoon stage. Essentially in the honeymoon stage, this is the absence of burnout. You have very high job satisfaction, you have high energy, you are feeling very engaged, committed, motivated, you're ready to roll, you're optimistic, you're creative, you're innovative. This is usually at the beginning of a new job or a new career or a new organization. If you're just out of college or you just got a promotion, whatever it might be, there is some novelty. Maybe it's a new project within your current position you're really excited about. It gives you a temporary boost. You're ready to go. A couple different things can happen here. You can either use this as an opportunity to build a strong foundation for yourself, build in that time for rest, have clear boundaries, etc. But what a lot of people do when they feel this energetic surge and this high motivation is that they start to neglect themselves in little ways. Cancel on friends here, stay up later than they should here, drink a little extra caffeine, work a couple extra hours. They start allowing work to become so much of a priority that other things that matter just as much start to slip. And this creates a rocky, unsteady foundation, because then when the stress starts to roll in, there aren't healthy habits and routines to hold you up. So if you're in the honeymoon stage, that's your opportunity to build a life that is balanced and boundaried, even within that higher energy where you feel like you could do anything, because that will start to slow down when the novelty ends, and you need to have a life that's sustainable beyond that. Now, if you don't create that solid foundation, that's when you escalate into stage 2 of burnout, which is considered the onset of stress. So this doesn't just mean you've had one stressful day, stressor here or there. It means the stress is starting to slowly build and compile. Other people are probably not noticing much of a change in you at this point, but you're starting to feel a little lower energy. You're starting to maybe feel a little dissatisfied, maybe recognizing that some things aren't quite as great as you thought they were. The rose-colored glasses have come off, so to speak. Your productivity might start to dip a little bit. You're struggling to focus, and you continue to or start to neglect some of your personal needs, exercise, taking breaks for lunch, getting 8 hours of sleep, those kinds of things. You might start to feel irritable, might have some trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. These are really subtle at the beginning, and people usually miss them. If you are listening to this and you're hearing me, don't ignore these early signs, because these are your opportunity to intervene. All these little indicators are telling you the stress is starting to build, and you need to manage it. You need to build in things that are fulfilling and nourishing for you, okay? If you don't do that, the stress continues to build. That leads us to stage 3. Stage 3 is chronic stress. I'm sure you've heard of this. A lot of us have struggled with chronic stress. This is the stage that is right before burnout. And too many people in our society, especially in America, are here right now. The things that start to happen when you're in chronic stress is your attitude starts to get negative. You start to get cynical. Your physical fatigue is more pronounced. You're getting some insomnia, maybe even some digestive issues or some heart issues, because stress has a huge toll on your physical body over time. The longer you're dealing with it, the more intense those symptoms become. And people around you are probably starting to notice your irritability is probably more pronounced. You don't have the patience you used to. Your fuse is getting a little shorter, but you're still able to get through. You're still able to do your job. And so probably nobody is overly concerned, especially if you are very good at masking what you're feeling. I know I was. People didn't know I was burned out, except for maybe my husband, until I was burned out. It was something that I was able to hide up until a certain point. It's not a good thing. I'm not bragging. But a lot of women especially tend to do this. We have learned to mask and to show up in a way that appears that everything is fine, even when internally we're feeling a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, things aren't going well. So that's stage 3, chronic stress. This is where you have a beautiful opportunity to make some changes in your life. If you don't, you progress to stage 4. Stage 4 is considered the crisis stage of burnout. This is the traditional burnout where those symptoms we talked about in the definition are full blown. You are dealing with disengagement from work. You are feeling with hopelessness, maybe even some emptiness. You're very pessimistic about your job, very negative, very cynical, very resentful. You are also neglecting your personal needs pretty much entirely. You have no really energy left for you at all. And you might start engaging in escapist behaviors. You might start doing things to just try to get away, make it all stop. The physical and mental exhaustion are extreme. Digestive issues, sleep issues, irritability, all the things that started before just become more intense in stage 4, to the point where it's debilitating for a lot of folks. People will typically seek a coach or therapist at this time, or they will quit their jobs. That's what I did when I burned out really early on. Anyways, that's a story for another time. This is the stage where it's very clear that something needs to change, and where more people will start to seek that because it's having such a negative impact on personal relationships, on work relationships, everything. Some people still don't deal with burnout at this point, and that is when we move to stage 5, which is chronic burnout. This is ongoing burnout that's happened for a prolonged period of time. The things that happen in this stage start to become clinically diagnosable. Burnout is not a mental health disorder. Let me just get clear on that. Burnout in stages 1 through 4 is typically something that isn't classified by the DSM-5. It's not something that you're going to go to the doctor and take medicine for from a psychiatrist. It is a workplace stress syndrome. Once you reach stage 5 chronic burnout, clinical mental health disorders have started to develop, most likely, including clinical depression and anxiety. So these have a whole plethora of other symptoms that now need to be treated. You can feel like a chronic sadness and a hopelessness. Your outlook becomes very bleak, very negative, and the chronic mental and physical fatigue is so bad that you might have also developed chronic pain, a chronic physical health condition, all these other things that happen to the body when it's under stress that's at this level for this long. Once you reach stage 5, you need physical and mental health support. You're going to need a therapist, maybe a psychiatrist. You're going to need a physical health doctor, all working in collaboration, because you're going to need a full overhaul. Not to say you shouldn't seek support earlier if you need it. Like I said, I am a coach for women. I support in burnout prevention and burnout recovery. I love working with people at any stage. But once you reach stage 5, you're going to need more than just a coach like you might need in an earlier stage. You're going to need a mental health professional, like a therapist or a psychiatrist, and a doctor to help you recover. Okay, so now that we know what burnout looks like and how the stages progress, I want to talk about things that you can do in each stage to really start to take care of yourself better, to start to prevent burnout from the roots of each of these stages. So if you're in the honeymoon stage, the things that you can do for yourself at that point, early on, before you're feeling burnout, is create healthy habits and routines. We talked about this a little bit already. It's worth saying again. You also want to draw clear boundaries between yourself and your work, between yourself and your family, between yourself and anybody that's having a negative impact on you. You want to learn to say no and draw boundaries. You also can intentionally identify your values and align your actions and goals with them. And finally, build a strong social support network. At work and outside of work, this is going to protect you from the physical effects of stress, and it's also going to give you people to talk to when the stress kicks in. Once you're in the onset of stress, that second stage, some things you can do are actively practicing stress management techniques, physical activity, deep breathing, mindfulness. You can lean on those social supports. You can collaborate with your supervisors and your team members to figure out what's a good plan for you. This is also where, if you notice that maybe you have some tendencies or there's some challenges with your mindset or your beliefs, just something that you want more help with, you're struggling with perfectionism, you're being really hard on yourself, you might want to work with a coach, somebody that can give you that accountability and support and resources and tools to help you navigate through the stress. In stage 3, chronic stress, if your work has an employee assistance program, this is a great time to tap into that. You definitely want to ask for support at this point. You're ahead of the game if you reach out to a coach or a therapist in stage 2. In stage 3, you're definitely going to need support from your friends and family, from your supervisor, from your colleagues, and from some kind of professional help. It could be a therapist, especially if you're dealing with past trauma that you need to work through that's contributing to this. If you're more focused on mindset, getting certain results that you want, reorientating the way that you're thinking and the way you're believing and connecting with your values, some of those more coaching and skills related things, then a coach might be a better fit for you. It really depends on your unique situation. But one good way to know if you need a therapist or a coach, if you really want to dive into your past and do that healing of trauma, you definitely want to go for a therapist. If you have a clinically diagnosable mental health condition that you need treatment for, you're going to need a therapist. If you want accountability and support and tools to build the life you want, to manage your stress, a coach is a great place to go. They're focused on the present and they're focused on the future. Okay, so you're going to ask for support, and you're also going to get really clear about your expectations, continue to enforce those boundaries, and do those stress management and self-care activities in this point. You really need to prioritize rest, play, and nourishment here because you're not getting them if you're in chronic stress. Once you're in stage 4, this requires some major shifts in your habits and routines and in the way that you're thinking and relating to yourself and your work. So the changes at all levels, in your physical level, your behaviors, in your thoughts, in your mind, all of these need a shift. So there's going to need to be self-reflection and support that's happening here in stage 4 to make sure that you're getting what you need and that you're able to overhaul the habits that got you to this place to start fresh. And it's going to take time. So to be really gentle with yourself if you're already here. We've already talked about what happens if you are in chronic burnout. Get medical support, talk to your doctor, talk to a therapist, consider FMLA if that's an option for you. Work closely with your leadership team to come up with plans to change your workflows to be more efficient and to be more sustainable for you. So that's a little bit about each of the cycles, what you can do within each of them to take good care of yourself. Now, there are, again, a few stress management go-tos. I'm just going to repeat these to make sure that nobody missed them. So the things that you want to do to manage your stress, to complete that stress cycle we talked about earlier, are physical activity, integrating it regularly. It can be right after a stressor happens. A stressful meeting ends, you do some jumping jacks or some sit-ups in your office. That totally is fine. I've done that. Maybe it's just taking a walk after work every day before you settle in at home. Maybe it's getting a workout in the morning, going to a yoga class, a community exercise event, making sure this is built into your life, both as something that's preventative and as something that helps you process the stress when it comes up. Deep breathing is really key in stress management, and you can use it anytime, anywhere. You can use it in the middle of a stressful situation or a crisis. Just taking slow, deep breaths will help your body return to baseline, especially in low to moderate stress situations. It's not as effective in super high stress situations because you really need that physical component to process it completely, but it will get you to a place where you can manage things and move forward. And then finally, the last thing that not enough people talk about is positive social behaviors. Again, this is from the book Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Highly recommend, especially if you are a woman in America struggling with stress and burnout. Positive social behaviors also return our body to a pre-stress state. That means having that chat while you're drinking coffee with your colleague about their kids or about the funny thing your cat did literally resets your body. Now, keep in mind, these are positive social behaviors. So not negative, not drama, not gossiping, positive, genuine moments of connection with colleagues, with friends, with family, all are healthy and healing and will reduce that stress. Affection with loved ones, a really long hug, laughter with friends, all of these are things that basically tell your body at a physical level that the world is safe, that it doesn't have to keep creating these stress hormones that are causing you exhaustion. So those are the 3 things that I recommend you integrate into your life now. There are also things that you can do to support one another. So if you are in a workplace where other people are feeling stress as well as you, or maybe you are pretty resilient to stress, maybe you've already come up with strategies, but the people around you are struggling, there's some things you can do to support them. And one of the most important things is to just check in. Just ask people where they're at, how they're doing, and listen. Empathetically listen. And you also want to empower each other to draw your boundaries, to take care of yourselves, to do what you need. Sometimes we just want someone to give us permission to do the thing we know we need to do. And we don't need permission, but sometimes we want it because we feel guilty, because we want to make other people happy, because we want to live up to all of these expectations. You just need someone to tell you that it's okay to take care of yourself. Now, when you are creating this foundation of a life that is thriving and balanced and joyful, self-care is important. And I talk about this last because I think too often we think self-care is the be-all, end-all. And if people are burned out, just do better self-care. It kind of puts the responsibility back on the individual, as if we aren't dealing with a lot of messed up stuff in the world. And that's not the case. There's a lot of things that are extremely stressful that need to change at a societal level. That only happens when each one of us cares for ourselves to the point that we have the energy to participate in changing these systems. Because when people are burned out and exhausted, they aren't out there making change in the world, I'll tell you that. So there are a couple areas that you can be sure to engage in self-care. And I'm going to talk about those, but before I do, I want to share with you the definition of self-care by Pooja Lakshman. She's a doctor specializing in women's health. She wrote the book Real Self-Care, another phenomenal book. The way she defines self-care, and this is me just going from memory, so it's probably not going to be perfect to her definition, but essentially she says that self-care isn't about the things you do. It's about the internal decision-making process that allows you to make tough decisions in the short term, knowing they're going to pay off tenfold in the long run. So it means having hard conversations, drawing boundaries, making time for yourself, even when you have things pulling you in 1,000 directions. The internal process of decision-making that's telling you that you're worth it, that's telling you that you deserve this, that's telling you that it's okay to love yourself, that is self-care. It starts in here. Doesn't matter how many bubble baths and yoga classes you engage in if you don't have that internal decision-making process within your own self. So that being said, there are a few areas that you can orient this decision-making to ensure that you have some balance in your life. Physical health, we've talked about that a bit already. Making decisions that align with your physical health, sleeping, eating, exercising, your psychological health, making decisions that align with your psychological health, whether that's therapy or journaling or reading. All of these things can be supportive to your psychological well-being. Your emotional health, this is a little bit different. This might include creating art or self-expression. It could include talking to a friend. There are lots of things you can do to support your emotional health. Just becoming more aware of what emotions you're feeling, learning to vocalize them and to identify what you need. Those are all really helpful things within the component of your emotional well-being. The next area of self-care is your spiritual life. So making sure that you have built into your schedule, to your routine, into your life, things that honor the spiritual element, whether that's a church community or prayer practice or meditation or time in nature, whatever it means to you to connect with something that makes you feel awe, that makes you feel inspired and wonder. That's your spiritual practice. You want to make sure there's room for that in your life, some higher container to hold and give meaning to our human experience. The next self-care area that you want to be thinking about in your decision-making is your personal life and your relationships. Honoring those relationships that mean the most to you, making sure you're spending adequate time building those, pouring into them, spending time with people that fill you up, being well boundaried with the people that deplete you, all of that. And then the last category is your professional and educational life. This is anything that you're doing to try to grow professionally or trying to learn and expand. Maybe you want to go back to school, maybe you want to get a specific degree. All of these things can be filtered through this self-care lens. And when you're doing this in the professional realm, you want to make sure that you are well boundaried in your professional educational pursuits. You want to make sure that you are setting goals that are realistic. You want to make sure that you are setting goals that are meaningful, that are aligned with your values, that actually are going to get you what you want from your life. All of those are things that you can consider so you're making decisions that are sustainable and healthy for you in the long run. I know that was a lot of information in a brief amount of time, but you can always reach out to me with questions. You can send me messages. You can email me. You can check out the website at internallyguidedleadership.com or my social media. I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram as Internally Guided Coach. You can find me in any of those places, start a conversation, or get a consultation.